Good morning, good morning, good
Good
morning. And
morning.
actually,
Yeah,
Katie, what time is it for you?
it's 12:15. 12:15, so 12:15 in
Mid
London. Yeah,
midnight.
yeah.
Hold on, what I don't even know what day
On
I
well,
am
it's
here.
Wednesday.
Wednesday here.
Wednesday. Yeah, so it's Wednesday morning. Quarter past 12
Okay,
on
so
Wednesday
you're
morning.
9 hours behind.
Yeah.
So the beautiful Katie has gotten, well, did you even go to bed or you just have
No,
been
I haven't
awake?
been to bed. I haven't been to bed yet. It's actually my birthday today as well, so it's a bit like, oh,
Oh my
this is
gosh!
real. So this is a real
Happy
bonus.
birthday!
No, it's
Oh,
good to
that's
be here.
so
Good to
cool.
be chatting. As I said, excuse the face. It's bedtime face, but not yet.
That's so fine. I slept in this. I woke up in this. I put a bra on. That was about all I did.
Brilliant. Awesome. Winning.
So yeah. So today we are going to hear a story from Katie, all the way from the UK. We don't do a lot of international ones, so it's so nice to hear you and your beautiful accent. And yeah, as I said, I always don't know much about people's story, but I was just reading Katie's form, and her loss was 17 years ago, which is the oldest one I've done, and I think it's going to be really
Oh,
cool to
really?
kind of hear, how time goes and what things look like. And I haven't actually announced this yet, but my plan for the podcast is I'm only doing the last three that we have scheduled in for, including you. And then what I do want to do is I'm going to wrap this up as season one, and then when I can, I'm going to come back and start a season two, and I'm going to talk to more where are they now type things, either people who are doing things within the industry or because I think the podcast so far has been so deep, and I've been interviewing mostly people who are still in that real heavy depths of grief. Um, and it's hard and heavy to be in that space all the time, and for the listeners and for myself and the rest of it. So, yeah, I'm really excited to hear your story. And so I guess, as I always start every podcast, and it's a long way back for you to think, but who was Katie before she experienced baby loss?
Katie, before she experienced baby loss, was a very carefree, sort of 25-year-old woman. I've been with well, he was my partner at the time that we lost Ella, but now my husband since I was 15. We've basically just, had a very, very happy time up until then.
Yeah.
I, yeah, working in London, all good. Ella was an unplanned pregnancy. And we'd actually just got engaged just before I found out I was pregnant with her. And then we had to kind of postpone the wedding and then obviously bring it forward again after we
Mm-hmm.
lost her. But yeah, everything was, I lived a pretty happy life. Not, the only loss I'd really had in my life was, grandparents. So it
Yeah.
sort of,
It's a different kind of
had a bit
loss,
of a
huh?
different kind of loss. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
so
And at
it
such
was
a
all
young
very
age,
good.
25.
Yeah.
25, you're like a little bubba still, really, aren't we?
Totally, totally. Yeah.
Whereabouts in London do you live?
Um,
Or
I
were
am
you
in
there? Are you
Battersea,
still in
which
London?
is yeah, still in London, been Londoner all my life. So yeah, still here.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
lived over there in 2013, 14, 15.
Oh, really? Oh, amazing. What, in
Yeah, I
London?
worked.
Ah,
Yeah, I got my 2 year traveler's visa or whatever they called it, and I worked for. So in Australia, I worked for Fitness First gyms,
okay.
and then when I went over there, I just called their head office and said I need a job, and I was in Queen Victoria Street and Holborn Circus.
Awesome.
Yes, I do love
Amazing.
London. I didn't love the
Amazing.
weather, but I do love
Awesome.
London.
Oh. Oh no, the
So
weather is crap.
okay, so
The weather is not good.
I know. I don't know how you do it. So unplanned pregnancy. You're pregnant with Ella. You postpone your wedding, and you go ahead with the pregnancy.
Yeah, went ahead with the pregnancy,
How was your
picture perfect
pregnancy?
pregnancy, absolutely perfect, like completely dreamboat pregnancy. Just, you hear all the stories about, oh, you're going to feel really sick, you're going to break out in a whole load of spots. Just to me, it didn't happen.
Mm,
The only thing, actually, I just got a massive craving for lots of sugary foods, and my mum said that I looked like a Jamaican from behind. But that was literally, she just said, your bum is so huge. And actually the other detrimental thing that I had during my pregnancy was it was a really hot summer towards the end of me being pregnant with her, and like Scorchio and traveling on the tube back and forth from
Yep.
work. I was wearing sort of, just floating dresses just for the ease of being pregnant, but I got really bad skin chafing on my legs, so it just showed I'd put on a lot of weight sort of in other places. But
Yeah.
that was the only complaint I've got. Other than that, it was absolutely perfect, to the point that actually every time I went to see a midwife at the hospital, it was like, any complaints? No, feeling great. I didn't see the same midwife once at my hospital. Every single
Okay.
midwife was different, which obviously is now sort of a bit of a bone of contention with the whole, continuity of care. I think if you see the same midwife, I think you build up a rapport and they get to kind of get a picture about it.
Yeah.
I did have a bit of a, we went to antenatal classes. When I say antenatal classes, they were just the ones that were put on by the hospital, sort of 6 weeks in the run up to due date. And I was conscious, I was surrounded by a couple of women who had had a scan and they were having an elective cesarean because their babies were breech. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I was born breech naturally, 40 years ago. So I, know that it's doable, but, it didn't really kind of, nothing really flagged up. And then I had a bit of a funny sensation probably about 4 weeks before she was born. And I was walking down to my local shops and I just honestly felt like I was having this grabbing sensation. And it didn't feel like a head. It was like, that is too big for a head. It was definitely like a hand or a foot. Now, obviously, on reflection, I know fully well that's what it was. And I said to my midwife at the next appointment, I've just had these really weird sensations where I've just felt like something's grabbing me. And she went, oh, that's just normal pregnancy niggles. And so again, I just, not having been through it before, I thought, oh, okay, well, that's totally normal. And I, didn't really pursue it any further. I then went when I say massively overdue, I got to sort of 41 weeks actually. And I went in to have a check and the midwife said, do you want me to give you a sweep? And I said, well, what does that mean? Just kind of not knowing what it didn't mean, but it was what what are the benefits of that? And she
What
said,
will
well,
it do?
it will probably bring on, if I give you a sweep, it might mean that I induce the labor. And she said, and then you'll have to stay in hospital until the baby's born. And I was a bit like, right, okay, what happens if I don't have the sweep? And she said, oh, well, it'll probably come on naturally. As you say, your pregnancy's been totally normal, textbook. So naturally, I just was like, right, I'll go away and wait. And the irony is they then had booked me in for a natural induction at 42 weeks, because in the UK, you can't go over 42 weeks. So I literally went away from this appointment at about 40 weeks plus 4 days and hung out and literally hoping, had a bit of reflexology, had everything that I was hoping that would bring it on naturally, had this whole birth plan of everything that I wanted, all the music playing, husband's going to cut the cord, I want this song playing, I want there to be no noise. It was like, ugh. And I went into labor on the nights of, so I was 41 weeks plus 7 days. And again, my labor was pretty harmonious. I mean, I was bouncing around on the bouncy ball and he was making cups of tea. We were kind of timing the contractions. And it was all just this whole thing of, shit, is this really like, what you see in the movies?
This is how perfect and easy it is.
It was so like that. It was so like that. And then they started to come really quite thick and close together. And I said to my husband, I think you need to call the hospital just to check, that they've got space and let them know that the contractions are coming sort of every, I don't know, by this point, probably about 5-6 minutes apart, but I knew it was building up. So he called the hospital and it was about as I say, 10:30 at night. And because she was a New Year's Eve conception, it's a very busy time in September, October. So he called and he said, we're just letting you know that, she's in labour. And they said, oh, actually, we haven't got any beds, so we'll have to transfer her to another hospital. And my husband went, what the hell? He went, we've only done the dummy run to this hospital. What do you mean we've got to go to another hospital? And they said, well, we haven't got any space right now. So they said, it's your first baby. Just go and, have a bath and they'll probably die down, blah, blah, blah. And as it stands, actually, they did die down for a little bit, but then they got, thicker and faster. And by about 5 o'clock in the morning, I said, no, Ben, really, actually, I mean, to be fair, actually, she was right. 6 minutes, they were then going backwards and forwards. They weren't as consistent, but you've got to check these things out. But then it got to about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was really like, no, this isn't good. So my husband called again, and they said, right, well, we need about an hour and a half before we can, see her. So can we speak to your wife? Because, then we can gauge like how far she's got to go. So of course I came on and this woman was, again, what am I to know? It was my first baby. I didn't have a clue. And she said to me, oh, well, you sound like you've got a long way to go. You're able to breathe through the contractions. So that would say to me that actually, even if you came in right now, we'll probably be sending you home. I was like, but all of our things say if they're coming every 5 minutes, you need to start getting yourself ready. Anyway, so I did that. I went to go and have a bath, and then my husband called back and went, she's not in a good way. We're coming in now. So we drove, and the hospital's about 20 minutes away. And honest to God, on the way to the hospital, I was like, this baby is coming out. We're going to have this baby on the way to hospital. But we managed to get to the hospital. And I now know it's a natural thing that once you do get into the hospital, it's like don't know what chemical it is in your body, but it naturally does slow it down a little bit. So they weren't then coming as thick and fast as they were when we were on the way. But we got onto the ward, and I was this midwife saw me, and she said, I think we'll be sending you home. You've still got a long way to go. It's your first baby. I was like, I'm not going home. I will stay on the ward, and I'm not going back home.
I'll sit in the hallway if I have to. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was then left for a little bit, given gas and air, which made me feel completely sick. Threw it at my husband, who was like, oh, I'll have a go. So he enjoyed it more than me. It was like, here, go for your life. And because it happened to be changeover time, I got the impression that this midwife kind of didn't really want to get her hands dirty. So she was a bit like gauging my reaction. I wasn't screaming in pain, but they were still coming. And she said, oh, it's changeover. So you're going to be in the hands of the next set of nurses who are going to be on duty for the next, 6-7 hours, just naturally assuming that that's how long it was going to be. So again, I was a bit like, oh, okay. So we were just left for a little bit. And then this new set of nurses came in, and they did the first examination. And she kind of, again, she didn't look that alarmed. She had a student nurse with her, and she did the examination, and she wrote something on her notes, and she kind of went away, and there was no sort of fanfare or anything about it. But then obviously, because she'd done the examination, she'd broken my waters. So about 5 minutes after she kind of, performed it, my waters broke, and there was meconium in the waters. So panic bells started to ring. So they naturally, because obviously, meconium means that a baby's in distress. So, they then had to do the whole thing and a registrar came into the room, and she did an examination on me. And that was where I realized something was quite wrong.
Had they been checking her heartbeat or anything in all of this?
They had been checking her heartbeat. We'd had an ECG, but my notes now do say that they got, and this is an after thing. We didn't realize this at the time, but obviously going through everything afterwards, they got her heartbeat confused with mine. So, and I don't know how that, well, that's what they've claimed
Fuck.
since, whether that was a ruse for, everything that happened, but
Mm.
that's basically one of the things that they said. But she went completely white, and she said, she looked around the room and she said, which one of you just examined this lady? Because she said, because she is fully dilated and this baby is coming out feet first. So
So
it
they
was a
didn't know
bit of,
she was Breech at this point, or
no,
she did?
no,
They
no,
didn't. They didn't know you were
no,
Breech.
no, they didn't know that we were Breech. Well, apparently they didn't know. What's also since happened in the unravel of everything and the horror of, how badly they acted.
Mm.
My notes when the
Fuck.
first woman did the examination, you can see on the notes, this is what our lawyers unraveled. The notes showed that she'd actually put suspected breach, but then it had been crossed out, and we think it probably got crossed out when she didn't want to get into trouble. So they had to submit these notes. And funny enough, my hospital notes went missing as soon as everything went wrong, which I gather is quite
Mm.
a common thing to happen. But panic stations. So she went completely white, and from that minute on, I had about 7 or 8 people coming into the room. An obstetrician came in, and it was all just, a bit of a whirlwind. And they said to me, and Ben, my husband, they said that this baby is coming out breech. It's too late to do a cesarean. I was sitting there going, but I know from all of the people who I've been in antenatal with who are having, you don't practice breech deliveries in this country. They used to practice them. They're not difficult if you have the expertise to deliver a breech baby. It's not difficult, but because they don't practice it, you normally have to have a cesarean. So I was there slightly panicking, going, but I just, you don't practice breech deliveries. And this obstetrician basically said, right now, our we have to think about you and not the baby. You are our patient. If we are to perform a cesarean right now, they said what we would be having to do is we would have to pull the baby so far up the birth canal that you would be at massive risk of uterine bleeding, possible hysterectomy, everything else. So they said, so we
Fuck.
need to continue with the vaginal delivery, and we will put you on standby to have surgery if need be. So I was a bit like, and I just remember my husband saying, well, you're the experts, you have to do what you have to do. Um, and so the next thing was I was taken into theatre, but still told to keep pushing and keep pushing.
Far out.
And I can't remember how long I was pushing for. It felt like an eternity. But when she was delivered, she, well, no, sorry, then, sorry, just excuse my, just going
No,
going
you're
back
right. Yeah,
over,
you go.
you know what
Yep.
it's like. So basically, we
Of
were
course.
there, and nothing. She just wasn't coming out. And the obstetrician then left the room, and we weren't, we found out obviously afterwards why he'd left, but I'll get to that a bit later. But he'd left the room,
Mm.
and the registrar, who was the one who'd picked up that she was breech, was there, and she was looking visibly panicked, and it just wasn't happening. I kept saying, I need to push, and her head was just not coming out. And then
Mm.
because she was breech, what then happened was the umbilical cord,
So her feet and
her
body had
feet
come out.
her feet and body had come out. And I obviously now know,
Oh, you poor
having
thing.
done all this, work on it and looking it all up, I now know that the body is a wonderful thing. Once the feet come out and the umbilical cord comes out so it's like a prolapse cord. There's only a matter of time
Mm.
because it stops pumping the oxygen to the baby. So it was at that point that panic stations were then pushed again, and the obstetrician had to come back, and he literally with brute force, got her head out and pulled her out. I don't know, he did some maneuver, can't remember what it was called, but
Uh,
basically pulled her out. But it was that moment of, and they put her on me, and she was totally grey. And I just remember having this moment of, she looks grey. Why are you giving her to me? You know, for fuck's sake, fucking do something. Doesn't look like a healthy baby. So they then took her off me, and then they took her off me, and then they were resuscitating her on the table next to me for, oh God, I don't know how many minutes it was. It felt like forever. But I was there sort of screaming, saying what's wrong with her. Nobody was telling me what was going on. They then took her away straight to neonatal, and I had to have an episiotomy and was all being completely stitched up and everything, in kind of complete shock. And it was 4 hours before they told me what was going on. 4 hours. So I was taken back to the labour ward where other women were giving birth. And I remember calling my parents and just saying, you know, because obviously I'd called my mum on the way to hospital to say it's all happening, blah, blah, blah. And they were expecting happy news. And I was like, it's not good. She's been taken off to the neonatal ward. And of course, my mum and dad were like, no, but babies sometimes need a bit of help, assisted breathing. I was like, Dad, it doesn't sound good. So they came straight to the hospital. And again, as I say, we were sitting in this room for hours. And my dad kind of, you know, being this, you know, lion man, came in and he went, this isn't good enough. And he went, what the hell's going on? And went off to find somebody and said, you know, somebody needs to come and let them know what's going on. They then brought me in. And again, all these things that you remember, you know, all these significant things that kind of the memories that you have. A nurse came in and two other people, and a doctor came in and sat on the bed and didn't kind of say anything. And the nurse standing behind her, or the midwife standing behind her, had a cardboard sick bowl. And, you know, it was the sick bowl. And I kind of sensed my dad seeing the sick bowl as well. You know, obviously sick bowl means that they're going to tell you something. And they sat on my bed and they said,
wow.
we just need to prepare you for the fact that she's really, really sick. And you need to start kind of thinking about, I can't remember if they said end of life care, but she's so sick. And it was suddenly like, what the actual fuck? Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to swear.
We swear all we like on this podcast.
Brilliant.
There ain't not many words for
exactly. It. So it was like, are you joking? And I just had that moment of, it had gone from, how has this happened, to, you know, total non-preparation, to I can't actually comprehend it. And I was like, they've got to go, they've got to leave, they've got to leave, they've got to go, they've got to go. And I said, I need to get out the hospital. And obviously, I think it was just the shock of everything. But it was like, I can't be here, I can't comprehend it. And they took my husband down to the neonatal ward, and he saw her. And he came back and he said, she looks really peaceful, but she's covered in tubes. I just think, you know, looking back on it, I feel guilty, but I think it was the way of my body just coping with it. It was like, I can't actually do this. I was like, I can't be here. I don't know what's going on. I think some mothers would naturally be like, oh, I need to go down and be with her. But it was like, I think I just felt so much shock. And they said, well, we can't discharge you because you've got this and got that, and you've lost a lot of blood. And anyway, so I stayed, and I did go and see her, but again, sort of seeing her for the first time, just being in that zone of just complete, what the fuck is going on? This cannot be happening to me.
Shock, yeah.
Total shock. And so we stayed with her for a little bit, and then I was able to leave. Again, it's one of those things, I can't remember if I'd probably could have stayed, but I think it was that whole thing of, I can't get my head around this. So I did leave, and we went home, and we went back first thing.
And was she still alive at this
still
point?
alive. She was still alive. And we went back first
Yep.
thing the next morning, and one of the neonatal doctors, first thing she said is, she said, well, she's had an improvement. So I was like, oh, amazing, amazing. So of course I was like,
Oh, doesn't it
she's
just
going to be
give you
okay.
like, oh
She's
my
good.
gosh,
So,
yeah,
so I was like, oh my God, amazing. So she survived the night, or, you know, everything. This isn't the end of the
mm,
world. So I was, of course, running on that whole thing of, oh God, it's all
yep,
going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. So I went into
mm-hmm,
that mode of, I think the mummy mode had kicked in then. It was like, right, I'm actually going to be able to take this baby home. And then my dad and my husband spoke to one of the doctors, and they basically said that she had severe brain damage. They said so she would have cerebral palsy. You know, she'd lost so much oxygen that even if she did survive, her quality of life was going to be rubbish. But because I was in that mode, it was like, no, I'm not listening to that. I'm not listening to that. I'm not listening to that. It was like, she's alive. She's alive. She survived through the night. It's okay.
yep. And even if that's the case, we bring her
We've
home, we
got
put
a
a ramp in,
baby.
we
We've
buy a
got
new
a baby. We've
car.
got a
Yeah,
baby.
that was
We've got a
us. Yeah.
baby. Um, but I
Mm.
remember my husband literally saying to me, Katie, he said, of course I want her to come home, as you know, any dad would. But he was like,
Mm.
I think you're misinterpreting that she's not going to be what we've expected, and this is going to be full on. So what they basically also said to him was, they'd said, she was still on a ventilator at this point. So what they then said to us is, they said, what we do now is we start to look at taking her off a ventilator. But they said, but we need to know what happens if we take her off the ventilator and she doesn't breathe. Do you want us to resuscitate her? He kind of had this sixth sense about the fact, not being cruel, but it was very much like, she's got to make this her own choice, Katie. If we take her off the ventilator and she breathes on her own, that's great. And we will take it to the next stage and go
Mm-hmm.
through, what might be. But if she comes off the ventilator and she's not breathing on her own, the chances are it's going to happen again. It was like, she's either going
Yep.
to be a complete fighter, or it's going to keep happening. I, of course, was like, right. And I mean, I've got photos, which I can't actually look at, of us just having this agreement. And I went with him and I agreed. And I said, okay, you're right. It's got to be her choice, because I didn't want to put her through any more pain. But obviously I was hoping and praying and begging that she was going to pull through. Anyway, we all stood around her and they took the ventilator off. Sorry, I just need to get some water. And she was breathing on her own. And so it was like, amazing. She's breathing on her own, breathing on her own. And it was, all I cared about was the fact that it was like, she's breathing on her own. She's breathing on her own. We've crossed that bridge. She, hasn't had to immediately need to be resuscitated. And we had 2 days with her, completely amazingly, just willing her just to keep going on and keep going on and keep going on. And I was fixated by all the monitors, and I learned everything, the heart rate, this. But consciously, we also, neither of us were getting any sleep. We were doing, like both of us taking it in turns to be there, on a ward with loads of other babies. And the other irony is that she was the largest baby on the unit. Every other baby was, really fragile, really precious, premature.
Same
But
as Milli.
there were no
Yeah.
full-term babies. So the neonatal nurses were, not that they're not drawn to every baby, of course they are, but it was the fact that she was just, they're used to dealing with really, really little ones who are like so teeny. She wasn't. She looked completely perfect. And obviously it was just what was going on in her brain that wasn't right. So
Mm.
she was, and so, as I say, we had 2 days of that, and just willing and hoping that everything was going to be okay. And then on day 2, or maybe early on day 3, her vital signs started to go down, and we'd be sitting by the machines and suddenly everything would just drop. And she'd do this, I hate it, I call it like, it's not, they talk about the death curl, but it was this and I'd go, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? And they said, well, it's actually her organs kind of shutting down, not responding. So
Fuck.
it was at that point that I turned around and said to Ben, I want to resuscitate her. I want to resuscitate her. And my husband and my mum and dad were like, you've, and I want to say it was a battle. It wasn't a battle, but it was me just not wanting to realize that this was happening.
Of course.
And he was literally begging me to say, the hospital have said that, if this is going to happen, it's going to happen again, Katie. It's not the outcome we wanted, but it's going to happen again. And we resuscitate her, and she'll go back like this for maybe 2 weeks, and then chances are it will happen again. But I mean, I had probably 2 days of this, and it went on and it went on and it went on. And I mean, there was one time when I was in Starbucks, literally ran downstairs at the hospital I had. Luckily, had a Starbucks, ran downstairs, and I got this phone call from my husband going, you've got to come back, you've got to come back. She's doing it again. And it was like, oh my God, I've got to get there, I've got to get there, I've got to get there.
Fuck.
And I'd go back there, and she'd make that noise, and then she'd just start breathing, and it would start coming up again. So it was like we were on this complete roller coaster. And it got to the night of day 4, and I said to the nurses, I said, we literally cannot be sleeping on this. Well, it was a chair. And I said, we're both completely knackered. The hospital also had very kindly not given me anything to stop my milk coming in. So my milk started to come in thick and fast. I looked like a proper porn star. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And they were like, well, if you pump, then it will keep producing. So I was like, so what do I do? So that, of course, made me feel really, really shitty. And I had these really painful swollen boobs with a baby that wasn't able to feed from them. And it all just felt really, really properly shitty. And basically, one of the nurses said, we can take her in, we can have a room with her, and we will bring her in so that they said she won't be hooked up to the machines, but they said, but we'll still be giving her, some of the meds that she needs. And I then kind of went a bit of a wig out because I'd become fixated on the machines. So I was like, no, because I need to see what her heart rate is. And they basically, I think I knew in my heart of hearts that it wasn't going to get better. So we took her into this private room, and it was actually the most amazing special time we had with her. Probably took her in at about 3 o'clock in the morning, had 4 hours just changing her nappy, cuddling her, and at about 10 to 7 on the Monday morning, she very peacefully just passed away in our arms. And my husband says this thing that, he says, I think she was waiting for that moment. I think, it was such a good thing to have done. She had that special time, just us in a room. And he kind of, if it was going to happen, that was the way that I would have wanted it to have happened. And then it kind of all felt a bit surreal after that. I couldn't believe that we were leaving hospital, and it was a really sunny day, and we kind of drove home, and I had, obviously, as that empty feeling of, I can't believe I'm not coming home with the baby. What's going on? And you're in that whole zone of, am I in a fucking living nightmare? But weirdly, this thing kicked in on the way home, and again, I shouldn't feel guilty about it because I know it's a natural reaction. But she was in the hospital, and we were driving back home, and I said to my husband, I need another baby. And he went, what? Katie, what do you mean? There's the baby. He went,
Yeah.
we've literally got to get through this right now. Stop even thinking about that. But I think it's that aching arms, isn't it? It's that whole thing of your body is pumping all these maternal instincts. So it was like,
Yeah.
you know, I needed a baby. It was like I needed to have a baby to have in my arms. Just not thinking about the fact that actually that is not going to happen for a long time. We then had to go through all that whole process of going back to the hospital. They also asked whether we wanted to have a post-mortem. And I said to them,
Okay.
why would we need a post-mortem? And they said, well, what does the post-mortem consist of? And they said, well, you just have to, I remember them saying, well, we'll have to make incisions on her face and do this and that. And I went, no fucking way. I don't want her touched. And I said, is there any other reason that I would need to have a post-mortem other than the fact that you have said, and that was my understanding, she died because, it was oxygen starvation. And they said, no, that's what will go on her death certificate, hypoxia, whatever it is that. Still, yeah, exactly.
HEO.
So I kind of,
Yeah.
didn't probe it anymore. And we kind of, just went through that whole horrible process of next steps and organising everything else. And they said, well,
Okay. Where were we?
So I think I just got to say, we're just
Yeah,
before we
you'd
left
just gotten
hospital,
home.
just
Yep.
but just before hospital as well, one of my friends, because you know what it's like, you're in that zone, you're not thinking, everything's just a complete blur, and you've got people kind of telling you to do this, telling you to do that, and one of our quite good lawyer friends said, you need to get hold of the notes, ask to get your hospital notes, and conveniently the hospital notes went missing. They couldn't find the notes. So that was the first
Far
red
out.
flag. It was like, we want to see the notes. We want to see the notes of what happened. I also, sorry, again, just, you know what it's like when you sometimes forget how the everything
I'm
happens.
so impressed it's 17 years
Just
later
before
and
we'd
it's
left
like, yeah, you're
it's
doing amazing.
just before we'd left hospital, when I was waiting to be discharged as well, this was, sorry, again, as I say, probably one of another red flags that kind of came up. A student nurse, a student male midwife who was in the room when she was being delivered, came into my room when I was waiting to be discharged. And so this was before Ella was, she was like, what, 8 hours old. He knocked on the door and he said, hello, how are you doing? And my sister-in-law was sitting on my bed and she said, well, how the fuck do you think she's doing? She said, she hasn't got a baby here and nobody's kind of telling her what's going on. And he said, it's really bad. It's a shame that we got her head and her bottom confused. And my sister-in-law said, it's a shame. She said, is that all you can kind of say? And do you know what he said? He said, I just want to ask you something, Katie. Did you or your husband excessively smoke or drink in the run-up to Ella being born? Yeah. And
Fucking
I
excuse.
literally at this point, yeah, this was it. So this was where it was a bit like, God, are they trying to kind of cover something up? And my sister-in-law said, are you joking? Leave the room. That's got nothing to do with it. He kind of apologized and he left. And then the next day when my husband was on the neonatal ward with Ella, the same guy came up and asked him if either of us have had a cold or a cold sore in the run-up. And I
Shut
was like,
up.
what? Why are you asking all these questions? It was like, seriously, just buzz off.
Get the
No,
fuck
no,
out.
no.
Yeah.
Exactly. Get the fuck out. Anyway, so then, yeah, the notes then took a long time to try and unravel. And we went through this whole process of, not doing an inquest because they said, we don't need to do an inquest because that we decided not to do it post-mortem. We're, happy that the baby died because of breech, blah, blah, blah. And so that was kind of it. We went through her, horrific funeral, as you know, teeny tiny coffin, just horrible. I can't remember much about it. And just started to try and, when I say build our lives back, how do you do that? But that went on for, what was it, October? And then in the beginning of February, when obviously naturally we'd started to think about, wanting to have another baby. It was like, right, okay, so we were, as fun as it could be, and my husband will, be a testament to this. That whole run up to trying to have a baby after you've lost a baby is not fun. He was like, this is not fun. It's not fun because it's a process. You're just like, I just want to. Was not, in the mood to be doing it, but it was like, just want a baby, just want a
Oh my
baby. And
gosh,
then I had those
totally.
2, 3, 4 months of, getting the period and just feeling like she died all over again. And then we got the report dropped on our doormat, probably about the beginning of February. And it felt like everything had just totally, I knew then that I'd been totally fucked over by them. The report basically said we won't really ever know the cause of death from of what was wrong with Ella. She could have had a genetic heart condition, but because the parents chose not to have a post-mortem, so again, it was put in black and white. And I read this and I howled on the floor, sobbing and completely sobbing, just saying,
What
holy fuck,
absolute assholes.
complete. Because at that point as well, I was like, we're trying for another baby, and now you're going to tell me that there could be a genetic condition. So that's when,
Yeah.
the barriers went down, and I was like, we need to kind of, we need to take this a bit further. And that's when I then instructed lawyers. And again, from then on, it was just a complete shit show after that. The brutal truth was that they didn't accept that I suffered from post-traumatic stress. We were offered, £10,000 for the loss of the baby, which is apparently, but no money quantifies the.
No.
I would have given, even if they said £1 million, it would be, I just want my baby back, but that's not going to happen. But it was because they were just putting up barriers that it was like, that's nothing short of insulting. I wasn't able to work. My husband wasn't able to work. I was having therapy.
Totally. Well, I was only talking about it on the weekend. Like, it's not about the money, but the amount of money it has fucking cost since that day and the impact it has on your life. I'm going to say 95% of my beauty therapy clients have not come back to me. I've had to rebuild my entire business. Only the brave ones come, and I get that, but I have some that just love coming in and hearing about Milli, but some of my clients who I absolutely thought would be here are not. And like,
I know.
they're just, I've paid $200 a week for therapy since, and you only get 10, they give you a little bit back for 10 per year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I need more than fucking 10
exactly.
sessions. Yeah.
Exactly. And the boxes of tissues that you go through during that session, it's like, Jesus Christ. So no, I can completely relate. And I can completely relate about how many people just you think that they're going to be there. People just don't know how to react when you've lost a baby. There's no kind of, people don't know what to say. And I do get it. People, we had some crass comments. One of my worst comments, which bizarrely enough, I can laugh about now because I'm like, what the actual fuck was going on with him? When I finally went back to work and my work were amazing. They were brilliant. They let me go back, part-time, just totally on my terms. But I went back and I remember I probably been there about 2 or 3 days, and I had to have this connection with one of the guys because I used to have to give him instructions as a production manager. So it's like I was used to giving him, and he would hover at my desk saying, client wants these changes made to the ad. And I was conscious he was hovering around the desk for ages. And I looked at him and I went, Steve, do you want to ask me something? But he didn't know what to say. So he went all awkward and he went, yeah, I just want to say, I'm really sorry to hear about what happened with, with your daughter. But at least you'll have fun trying for number 2. And I looked at him and
Did
went,
you grab his ball
what, you think
sack
it's like
and
a pair of...
fucking
I literally,
like
I just looked at him and I went, what, you think it's like going to buy another pair of Jimmy Choo shoes? I was like, just fuck off. And my boss kind of saw that it was such an inappropriate thing to say that I was like, just fuck off, fuck off. But I kind of,
oh my
as it is in life,
lord.
I do realise now, I think the best thing you can say to someone who's lost a baby is, I don't have a fucking clue what to say. And unless you've walked in
Yeah.
their shoes, just say, I'm thinking of you and I'm so sorry. Not any of the
That
crap
is
shit
all it
about,
needs to
oh, well,
be.
maybe it was for the best. Maybe that's
No, it's just,
all
and that's
anyone
what,
needs to say. It just needs to say, there
yeah,
are no words. I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. Don't try and
yeah.
say something like, this or that. So, that's...
Mm-hmm.
But again, I live in Battersea, where I live was at the time completely saturated by. It was known as Nappy Valley. It was one of the most saturated places in London with babies under the age of 2. So I could not even get myself to the station every day without being confronted by pregnant women and women with babies. And I used to have to literally get a cab, and I would become this evil. When I say evil, not evil, but just could not engage with other people. And I remember another experience I had to go and return something that I bought for Ella from a shop on our local high street. And I walked into this shop, and it was probably about 3 weeks after she was born, so I still looked like I could have been about 5 months pregnant. And there was this woman there with a baby, and the baby was cooing, and she was obviously doing that whole thing that new mums do, look at my baby, and I just completely death stared her, didn't look at the baby, just glanced away. And you can just tell these people's reactions. She was a bit like, ooh. And then she was standing behind me at the counter when I was trying to take this thing back, and the woman behind the desk said, is there anything wrong with the item? And I just went, no, I just don't want it. Because I couldn't bring myself to say what happened. And then I went, no, Katie, tell them what happened. And I went, no, my baby died. And she, of course, didn't know what to say. And then the woman behind, who was with the cooing baby, both of them, I just felt that whole thing of shit.
Fuck.
And I think that's the other thing that happens when you lose a baby. It's a lot of things about other people's uncomfortableness, that they don't know what to say. And so sometimes you're conscious that it's such a horrific thing to be going through yourself that you don't want to put it on other people because of their reactions. I don't know if you can relate to that, but you kind of...
Absolutely.
You gloss over actually the trauma of what you're going through because of how they might react. And again, I think
Yeah.
that's one of those things
Definitely
that
in
I'm
the
a bit
early
like...
stage. Yeah, I think definitely in the early stages. And this weekend I just got back I just spent 5 days in my own old hometown. And even one of my girlfriends said, God, you've gotten better at talking about this, in terms of so confidently, so openly, quite brutally, but also almost I'm able to control people's reactions, because when they're like, I'm so sorry, I'm like, thank you so much, thank you. And like these brute tattooists over the weekend are like, I just love how you talk about her. And I said, she's my daughter, of course I'm always going to talk about her. And this one guy, this tattooist, is sitting next to me, and he'd already had his wife and daughters come in and visit. Oh no, there was another guy, but he has 2 daughters. And he said, he looked up at me and he said, it's not the same as your loss. He said, but between 7 and 20 weeks, they found out their little baby's skull wasn't growing and they had to terminate. His eyes welled up and he looked at me and he said, I've never spoken about this. And I just was like, please give me a cuddle. And I'm laying there getting tattooed. And I'm like, and my girlfriend who's a tattooist is looking up at me like, you're fucking hopeless. You know, she's quite funny. Like, she's like, she doesn't talk about stuff. And I'm cuddling this guy who's never spoken about the loss of his child, which would have been maybe, from what I could gather, 6 or 7 years earlier. And he's crying. I said, bro, I said, yours may have only been 17 to 20 weeks, but you had to terminate your child and you've never spoken about it. It was like, I'm so blessed that you just told me about this. And I hope it gives you confidence and strength to talk about it again,
I think that's so true. I think it does. It definitely triggers a lot with people who've, I've had, a lot of people say the same, but I always say, it doesn't matter whether you've had a stillbirth, whether you've lost a miscarriage, a loss is a loss. You're grieving the life of a human being that you were expecting to nurture and bring into the world. And I've got a really good friend actually who I met at a bereavement group after Ella died. She had a stillbirth. She exactly the same age, and we then went on to have our rainbow babies together. And she's my son's godmother, and we have such a close connection. But she constantly says to me, Katie, your loss is so much worse than mine. And I'm like, no. She's like, but Katie, you've got the blame, you've got this. I'm like, no, Christina, you went through, a stillbirth. I was like, I had Ella for 5 days. I said, I am so blessed to have got those photos of her.
Isn't it crazy?
I sometimes think, isn't it crazy? It's that parallel of, they will think that what I went through is worse because she survived for a few days and then died. And I'm like, actually, I think that what you went through is heartbreaking.
And I've heard
it just doesn't matter.
I feel like us who have had babies on earth for a few days and those with stillbirth, we all agree the same thing. Like, they think it's worse, but I think it's our own coping mechanisms
what they went
to feel blessed with our own outcome. I think, because I've had it's strange, but I think it's maybe our way of being like, no, what I got was I'm grateful for the time I got, and they're grateful that they didn't have to make those decisions we made, or what. I don't know, but I hear you. It's very common.
Maybe. Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, but we went, they finally agreed just before we went to court that they were negligent. So we settled, and that was it. But then the big stab in the heart came when, and this is the thing that I think my husband really does struggle with. If we had had an inquest, if we'd done the post-mortem, a lot more would have been unravelled. Ella was born in October 2006. My rainbow baby, my son, was born. He was conceived on honeymoon in April 2007. So he was then born January 2008. So a year and a half after Ella died. And then I got pregnant again very quickly with my next son. Very, very quickly with my next son. Sorry, I've got all the teenagers.
That's right.
I'm doing a podcast. So he's like, so there's only 15 months between my eldest two, and then there was another 4 years. So in 2012, I was heavily pregnant with my fourth child. And I got this phone call from a newspaper, and he was an investigative reporter. He used to do something in the UK called Tomorrow's World, which is like he investigates. And he literally, like a complete bolt out the blue, called me up and said, we are doing a program about private care versus NHS care, and we've managed to get a Freedom of Information Act about your birth. It transpires that the obstetrician who we were told, who left the room, who could have delivered Ella but left the room, left to go and be with a private cesarean patient. And the reason he left is because And the reason he left is because if he hadn't left, he wouldn't have got his consultant's fees. So that was a total, like, what the actual fuck? It was like, you cannot be...
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. So then it was totally exposed. He was interviewed. Actually, no, he didn't. He refused to get interviewed for this program, but his colleagues were interviewed, and they were trying to, gloss it over and everything. But it was clearly apparent that that's what had happened. Unfortunately, our lawyers as well. My husband's a bit like, they should have picked that up. So we were left with that whole thing of what do you do? Could have got him struck off the General Medical Council, but I was, heavily pregnant, and I was like, I don't think I can go through this again. It was like, I haven't just kind of started to get my life, as I say, back, slowly finishing the therapies, and I was a bit like, what's it going to gain? I don't think it's not that I don't want closure, but what is it going to do for me? It's not going to bring her back. And I also just knew that it wasn't going to change anything. A good bit of PR, we did expose the hospital, and they were, still proud of the fact that if you Google mine and Ella's name, that the article comes up, first article that comes up. And I still do that quite regularly, just
what do
to
we
check
Google?
that it's called, so I've got it right here. If you just Google, and it unravels the whole thing, it is, if you Google, it's not connected to the internet, is it? Shall I? It's basically, if you just put Katie, Ella Daisy Mackay, and then I think it says Katie Harmon, an article should come up on the Daily Mail, which
I'll put a link.
the
I'll put a
headline
link
of
in
the
the
article.
notes.
I'll put perfect. It just says, did Katie's baby die because her consultant abandoned her to care for a private patient? Ella lived for just 5 days after a catalogue of errors at her birth. So it's all there in black and white. But, it's one of those things, I think, just going back to the whole talking thing, my therapy has always been to talk about it. I want to talk about her. I don't want people not to talk about her. As you say, it's a natural thing. And a lot of people initially didn't want to talk about her because they felt uncomfortable. And I remember a couple of friends, not friends, but people going, I don't really want to come around to the house because it's really weird that you've got photos of her. And it was like,
okay, well, don't come to my fucking house then.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, your choice. And so, my therapy has definitely been to talk about it, and I've done a lot of, talking about it, joined all these, as I say, SANS forum. Just, you become part of that community, don't you? It's a club that nobody would ever willingly want to join, but when you're in it, you meet the most amazing women, and it's one of those things. All I ever wanted after she died was, I didn't want to hear advice from anyone else. I didn't want to hear people going, oh, my uncle died and blah, blah, this. It's like, did you lose a baby? Did you lose a baby? If you lost a baby, then I want to hear how your grief process was. If you didn't lose a baby, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah. Put
And
your
those
camera
women
down so I can see.
Oh, sorry. Those women
Hello,
become
there you are.
really good. They become your kind of your safe space to talk about it, and that's all you kind of want when you've lost, been through such horrific circumstances. The other thing is that I was really lucky. When I say lucky, my mum and dad lost their first baby to
wow.
Yeah. So they were amazing in my healing process. I think perhaps if they hadn't been through it, and I'm really close to my mum and dad, if they hadn't been through it, I remember I used to, literally I would be crying in my pajamas, first sort of, 4 weeks, as you do, just going, I'm never ever going to be happy again. I'm never going to be happy again. And I remember my mum saying, did you have a happy childhood, Katie? She said, because, we went through the same thing. I know that it wasn't necessarily negligence. I know Ella should still be here, but we still lost a baby. And I really had to kind of, second guess it. And I went, well, no, Mum, I was happy and you were actually happy. And she was
Yeah.
like, I know you won't believe it now, but you will not get over it, you'll learn to live with it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
thing. And actually what I say now, and this is just me talking, 17 years down the line, I obviously I would have never wanted to be in this position, but the gift that she's given me has made me a better person than if I hadn't gone through her loss.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of can see myself. I think that was the point that I realized I can't bring her back. And you go over all those what ifs, but the what ifs were just coming to the same ending. So they were torturing
Yeah.
me. And it was like, nothing's going to change. So
Yeah.
you only have one life and you've got to try and live it. And I've also actually trained as something called a rapid transformational therapist, having gone through therapy after therapy after therapy. And I'm not bashing therapy because I think therapy is great, but being handed boxes of tissues and going every week and paying £80 to sit and talk to somebody who I'd have to relive what went on, and just talking and talking and talking was a bit like, I'm just going over it. I'm going over it. I'm going over it. I'm not getting any closure. Um,
Yeah.
I had EMDR treatment, which was good, but brought a lot of the flashbacks back. And then I discovered something called rapid transformational therapy, and I had a session with a guy purely based on trauma. And it was probably, so that was about six years ago. So yeah, that would have been about 14, 13 years after she died. And I can't tell you how empowering this session was. It released so much trauma from me. I mean, I cried. I literally gut-wrenching cries. You basically reframe. You go back to scenes that are. It's a combination of something called neuro-linguistic programming, CBT therapy,
NLP.
psychotherapy, and a
NLP.
bit of mild hypnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you go back to 3 scenes that are connected with the belief that you have surrounding your issue. And my issue was traumatized. And I think I felt guilty. I think I was holding on to that thing of, if I'd done this, if I'd gone to the hospital, if I'd insisted, if it had been my second baby, and I'd said, no, I'm not happy that niggling feeling. No, I'm not happy the contractions are
Mm.
coming 5 minutes apart. It would have been a different story, but I couldn't change the outcome. Anyway, I had the session and it literally completely changed my whole perspective of what had happened. And I can genuinely say now that I obviously I still have those days where I cry. Her anniversary is always traumatic. The day that she died is always traumatic. Christmases, all those days that they should be here. The first day of school is traumatic. I
Yeah.
know she's
Yeah.
going to turn 18 in October, and I know that's going to be a massive head fuck. But I can say I have kind of handled it, I think, without caving in and ruining
Without
the
it
rest
ruining
of
your
my
entire
life.
life. Yeah.
And I think that's those are the options that you have. And I know it's a really,
Yeah.
really hard thing to do, because it is the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone. And I do genuinely agree. People say that, losing a child, doesn't matter what age it is, it's not the natural course of events. So
Yeah.
it shouldn't happen. So you're always going to be grieving babies, you're grieving for a future that they're not going to have. But yeah, no, I definitely, I think it's made me a more compassionate person. I'm also very conscious that I don't ever judge what's going on behind everyone's struggling
Yeah.
or going through a battle that people don't realize. So just don't judge, just be
That was actually what else
compassionate.
happened. So over the weekend, I spent the weekend with my friend. Just opened a tattoo parlor down in my old town, and so I went down there my new addiction is to just cover myself in ink at the moment. And I was down there, and there was a lady sitting 3 seats up. She was an older woman, maybe in her 50s, and she was getting something on her arm. And I'm a sticky pig, so in between my breaks, I'd go over, "How are you going?" And anyway, because I've got so many tattoos of Milli now, I'd start chatting about it. And this woman looked at me and she said, "I've been watching you down there, and I just thought you were this young, beautiful girl with her whole life ahead of her." She said, I had no idea that you were going through this. And I think it was a real moment for her. Like, wow, she'd just probably been judging me, sitting there, whatever. And yeah, you don't ever know what someone's going through. And even I'm the same when I see pregnant girls or girls with babies. Like, one of my other friends said she always gets jealous, and I said I don't, because I don't know what they've been through. When the next time I'm heavily pregnant or carrying my baby, people are not going to know the hell I've just been through for the however many months and years prior. So we don't know anyone's journey.
No, it's so true. It's so true.
It's so nice to hear, and this is exactly what I want the podcast to look like, in the next season, because, hearing from somebody who is 17 years on, we who are all still in those early stages, it's hard to see that life can be good on the other side, and that we will, and still that you will still cry on the it's and I love, you still remember the story, maybe not in every single detail, but a lot of it, because sometimes we get scared you're going to forget it. I don't want to forget her story, or I don't want to forget her anniversaries, and I know that it'll never happen, but obviously you have those fears. So hearing your story, hearing how strong you are, but that the pain is still there, but you've been able to, my psych always says, build a life worth living. And you've done that, but you still honor Ella, and she's still there.
I was also so massively conscious about how many people break up, like the divorce rate after, and that really shocked me. And again, the obstetrician said to my dad in the hospital, literally the morning after, we were supposed to have a meeting anyway before she died, but she obviously then died that morning. So I couldn't go to the meeting, but my dad went along, and the obstetrician said to my dad, he said, this shit breaks up families. He said, 80% of couples don't survive this. And when my dad said that to me, I was like, I'm not going to fucking let them, take that down as well. So that became another thing. It was like, I'm not going to, let that happen. And I'm aware that men and women grieve very differently, and it is really, really hard. My husband found it very hard to talk about. He just was very much like, of course it affected him, but he couldn't talk about it as much as I did. And he also has since said to me quite a few times, he said, back in the early days, everyone asks how you are, because it's the natural thing. How's Katie doing? How's Katie doing? I think I'd like to say it's got a bit better over the years. And also,
Agreed.
I just want to say what an amazing job you're doing, because podcasts, they went around. I got handed a book about, I can't remember who it was even by. It was, the loss of a baby. And it was just going through the motions of, this is how you'd feel. But this forum, Sans, became my lifeline, just chatting online to women. But, podcasts and what you're doing are just amazing. And, when I first listened to your podcast about Milli, it completely took me back, and all the emotions came out again. My husband came downstairs. He was like, "You're having lunch. What are you doing? You're in floods of tears." And it was like, you just hear someone else's story and you just think, oh my God, that feeling that, of not wanting anyone else to go through it, and feeling so desperate for somebody because you know exactly what position they're in. And it's horrific. But
and your and my
awareness.
story are so similar but not, and like that's why I'm like, it's mind blowing me, because I had the fucking private obstetrician who did deliver my baby by Caesar, and
Mm,
it's still fucked up, but um um yeah, the life support, the HIE, which she didn't even have, but an undiagnosed genetic disease that she did have, and all of the things. So like, yeah, hearing your story is like, whoa. But I have a question, and it fucking does my head. Like, so did you have scans, and how did they not, like, so my whole thing is, when we get wheeled
in
in to
with
have a
my
baby,
pregnancy. Yeah.
how do they not fucking know she was breech? Like,
Well, this is the
or
thing.
they say it,
We
they
get
say
a
they
scan
feel.
at.
Yeah, but you got it fucking wrong. Sorry. I
Well,
get
the other
passionate
thing
about
is,
that.
the weird thing is, we only get scans at 12 weeks, and then you get the scan at 20 weeks here, and then after that, you don't get another scan. So it's called the anomaly scan, and she was the right way round in the anomaly scan. And the weird thing is, I went to go and have one of those 3D paid for a private, you know, so we could see her
Mm-hmm.
face, which again, I'm really grateful I did, but we paid for that. And she was the right way around at that one, which was at about 28, 29 weeks. So
So
she
she was
turned at some
engaged. She was down.
she was head down. So she turned at some point between 29 weeks and 40 weeks. I find it hard to, again, think why again. And that was one of the things that also again troubled me. It was like, I must have had a day where it felt slightly uncomfortable, but apparently there's still a bit of movement for them to be able to move at that stage.
But also,
Um,
my question, and this, because
but
this is
no,
not on you, that you didn't have the scan. My question is, and how is it not necessary
yeah,
every fucking time a pregnant woman goes into the labor or goes into the birth,
that they do it
at
to have a
that
scan, just
point,
to
scan
put a
them?
mobile scan them 100%. And this is one of the
It's
things
not
that
fucking hard.
exactly, and it would save them a lot of money from cesareans that they then realize. And not only that, negligence cases, because if it fucks up like it did in our case, you're looking,
Yeah.
mobile scan. That's all you need to do. A mobile scan. It costs nothing. It gives
Two
peace of
second
mind.
ultrasound. There's the head. There's the bum. Let's go.
Just exactly. That's one of the things that I think is massively important. Um, and I would love to see that change in this country. But sadly, if
Mm.
you read the newspapers, it's not I don't try and read them, but they're triggering when
Mm.
you read cases of it's still fucking going on. And I actually think in this country it's worse than it was before. It's a systematic problem. Um,
Mm.
and it's like, how many people need to go through this before you just do something about it? All of my friends, what I will say is, all of my friends in the run up to having babies after Ella were insistent on having a scan, and they said, we want a scan, and they'd say, my friend just lost a baby, give me a scan. So I always feel good that that they
Mm.
were given that, just because of, they were like,
Yeah.
just need that peace of mind. And again, in the run up to having my 3 children after Ella, I couldn't go back to a hospital, so we actually had they were born at home, which,
Really?
yeah, the first one, it wasn't planned to be born at home. The plan was, I had a private midwife because I needed continuity of care, because I needed to have someone who'd seen me all the way through.
I
She
understand.
did say to me, I can deliver the baby at home, but I was like, no, no, no. I just want you to see me all the way through the pregnancy, check that, what you see at this week is the same as the next week. And I was acutely aware that she would come to hospital with me and she wouldn't have been able to deliver the baby because the hospital said, well, she's not insured. But when push came
Mm.
to shove and we were at home and she said it's time to go to hospital, again, that trigger went, and I went, I can't do it. I can't do it. All
Mm.
the emotions came back,
Oh,
and I went,
bless.
what if it's breech? So she said to
Mm.
me, let's just stay
Mm.
at home. And I remember her saying to me, we've got to go now or we stay at home. And I went, but what if the baby's breech? And she went, I know how to deliver a breech baby, but the baby is not breech. Trust me. And so we stayed at home. And for me, I think, again, that was part of the healing process for me, because it was the most amazing, beautiful thing. There was nobody around. I was in my own bed. So we had that lovely bonding time. And then I think I was empowered just to say I can do it again. And I haven't had to go back to hospital to have a baby. And I think, that's a real trauma for people who've lost a baby. I know loads of people who haven't had that option. They've lost a baby, or they've had to have, a D&C after a late miscarriage or a stillbirth. And that trigger of going back to the hospital, doesn't matter if it's the same hospital, it's...
I will never go back to at the hospital we birthed Milli at. We always thought we'd go back there, as a bit of a healing process, but there is absolutely no fucking way. I had to drive in their driveway the other week to collect my files. I've requested my files, and for whatever reason he wouldn't send them to me. I had to go pick them up. And I asked my auntie to come with me. And driving up that driveway, I realized the last time I drove there was to birth Milli. And I just was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, it was not good. It was not good. But I love that you've just said that, because, obviously, I've always had, I think women who go through labor is just that you're so powerful and magical and incredible, because I've only had the Caesar, and I'll only ever have Caesars because of what they did to my uterus. But one of the girls I interviewed not long ago, Kiki, she lost her little baby Sprout through a stillbirth at home, and then he had already passed away in utero, and then they had to go to hospital to deliver. She's pregnant now, and she's having another home birth, and I'm like so scared for her, which is not my position to be scared for her, but she's like, no, I'm doing this. And so I love hearing that you've done that, because I know she will listen to this, and I'm just so, I know that you will now give her that confidence and empowerment that it can and will be okay.
100%. I think, as I say, if you've been through something, it's just, to repeat the trauma of going through it, if you can have a different experience. And for us, it was amazing. And as I say, I'm really grateful that I, didn't have to go through that again, because I think it's just so triggering. And like you, some people don't have that option, so it completely can be really scary that you don't have
and
that
some people
choice.
choose to go back to the same place because they feel like because they feel that will be the healing. There's no way I can see my obstetrician at the end, because I fucking told him the whole time I was pregnant I never felt her, and he always said, even when you said before, like, oh, I felt like it was a hand or a foot, and they said no. Well, fucking listen, I'm the mother, and I know. And but it's your first pregnancy. Yeah, it might be our first pregnancies, but we have these innate female women instincts, motherly instincts. We fucking know. So when I tell you my baby's not kicking me, don't tell me she's clicking my placenta, because I was right and you were wrong. So I can't see him at the end of my bed, but I see him in my nightmares. But I have a new obstetrician and I love her, and I just said to my auntie yesterday, I am really excited to be in that room and have a cesarean and have her there and deliver my baby. And that's the first time in 11 months I've felt that, and I do feel really good and excited about that. So, and when I was saying before about how I'm scared for Kiki, I'm fucking scared for anyone that's having babies, like it's just this, I can't wait to see your healthy baby delivered for you, that's all I ever want for anyone.
There's another thing that I struggled with over the years, which was quite hard for me, and I've got over it now. It's that whole thing about, oh, we can't say that we're pregnant for 12 weeks because when we get to 12 weeks we're past the safe period. I'm like, no, there's no fucking safe period until that baby is in your arms. But so many people are still in that thing of, oh, it's all right, we're through the whole thing. And I could never get to that stage. It was like I could not relax until you've had that baby, and that's the kind of misconception that I struggle with. It's like there's no safe period. There is no safe period. I don't mean to be awful. But also, just other thing I just want to add. We have this thing called National Childbirth Trust NCT classes here, and I was too late to get on it with Ella, so I just didn't join, and I just did the hospital one. But everyone was talking about it when I was pregnant with my second child, so I called up and I kind of said I'd like to come along. I mean, again, this was 18 years ago, but when I told the woman my story, do you know what she said? She said,
Mm.
"Oh, she said you might scare people off, so would you mind just, we wish you luck with your pregnancy, but maybe,
Shut up.
yeah, again, maybe it's just best if you just come back after you've got a healthy baby, because we have to talk about birth stories and it might upset some people." And I was like, if I can save one fucking woman who might have an undiagnosed breech, I went fucking mental. So needless to say, I never went back to NCT
Oh
anymore.
my
And it
God.
was, you know, it has changed. It has changed now. It has changed now, and they are a bit more open to it. And you know, baby loss is more of a talked about thing. But I just remember thinking, are you joking? What, you don't want me to upset a woman there because of my story and what I've been through? As you say, go fuck yourself.
Exactly, because I used to never do that. I used to find it so rude, and it's been my thing in the last few weeks. It's just like I almost got it tattooed the other day. Like,
It's really empowering, I
I
think. Just
just, I know, I know. And a few of us have even said on some of the podcasts, like, why aren't we taught in birthing classes about what happens if your baby dies? Because we're
yeah,
not prepared for. I'm
100%.
sitting in my baby's
Mm,
nursery. We're taught how
mm,
to be ready
yeah,
for SIDS and have a good cot and have this and have that. But if something goes wrong, these are your
mm,
options. You don't
yeah,
have to leave your baby at the hospital. You can take them home. You can take them here. There's this opportunity. You'll have to decide whether you want them buried or cremated.
yeah,
All the things that, no, we shouldn't have to think about that, but we do. Rather
100%.
than the shock. And even though, even if we were told this in a birthing class, we would all think that's not going to happen to
You don't
me,
think it's going
of
to happen to
course.
you. Yeah, yeah.
But we
But
fucking
it's
need
just about
preparation.
letting you know, isn't it? Yeah, 100%. I totally agree.
Mm.
I totally,
And then
totally
we also
agree.
get told, make sure you have a kick count. I literally would say to him, I don't have a kick count. She doesn't, I don't have one. Oh, that's your normal. That's just your normal.
Well,
Okay.
actually, that was quite weird as well, because breech babies, they don't move as much. So because so again, it was
Well, he also told me that breech, like, so I thought a breech baby, I knew it wasn't overly common. I was the only one in my birthing class because they said, has anyone got a breech baby? And I put my hand up and she went, oh, there's always one. And everyone kind of laughed. But my OB had taught me
yeah,
that she might not have moved because there might, like, my uterus might have been a strange shape. So we could try to make her move, but,
right,
and I
okay,
said, no, no, no. If she hasn't moved, I'll leave that to her. I said, she knows the insides of me better than I know myself. I never for a second thought there could have been something wrong with her because he
yeah,
didn't tell me that. He just said it was the
mm,
shape of the insides of me of why she hadn't moved. And then later on, I said to him, hey, like, breech babies is quite common that there could have been something wrong with her in terms of, like, low muscle tone or whatever. Oh, yeah, I know. Well, why
yeah,
the fuck didn't you teach me that? You know? And I'm not saying that there was something wrong with Ella of why she didn't turn, but I'm just saying that,
yeah,
like, there are reasons for it and it's not uncommon, but they did used to vaginally birth breech babies. So my doctor, my GP, is Argentinian and they
right,
do deliver breech babies over there. So she was giving
really,
me tips from about 33, 34 weeks. If you go into labor, this is what you need to do. So she was like, kind of guiding me. One, I was at very high risk of a prolapse umbilical cord. And that's super dangerous, obviously. And then, how to, it was just, yeah, it's just fucking wild. Like, and then for you to not know and them not do a scan right at that minute when you're in labor, like, there
yeah,
are
just
ways to make these things not happen.
100%,
So why
100%.
aren't they doing it?
We basically, we liken it just to a red light system. We're like, we went through too many red lights. You go through one red light, you might get away with it. You go through two, again, you might get away, but you go through three or four, you're gonna have a
Mm.
complete car crash. And that's exactly what happened.
That's so true.
But
It has been
bless.
such a pleasure to hear your story. I want to know, what are your other 3
Thank
babies'
you.
names?
I have a Zach, an Alfie, and a Rafferty.
I love them.
Oh.
So you got 3 boys.
3 boys. Special place for me in heaven, I'm told.
Isn't that crazy?
Again, we have that whole thing of, oh, did you not want to try for a girl? Fuck off. And then I go through that whole thing of, yeah, I've got a girl. She's up there waiting for me, and then again you have people going, oh, so
Yeah.
sorry. And some days you just suck it up and you go, yeah, no, girl didn't come. Depends on who you want to speak to and what kind of mood you're in. But you know,
Fuck. Yeah, of course. Wow.
wow.
Is there anything else you want to add? Yeah, as I said, I've just loved hearing your story. I love
Bless you. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you. Sorry, I just look a bit definitely pajama face ready.
Oh, stop it. Me too.
But I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you're doing, because honestly, if podcasts and what you're offering had been around, it would have you're just definitely just listening to people's experiences and having that, option to hear people's stories, I think. And also
Not feeling so alone, I
you
guess,
doing it so early on as well, is amazing. And Milli would be so proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank you. It's helped me, like I know someone said to me the other day, oh, so how long ago was your loss? And I said, oh, 11 months. And they were like, but this is, it has been for me as well. And so I appreciate everybody that, gives me this sacred space to share their story, because, it makes me not feel so crazy and alone and stupid. How did I not know? How did I not do this? And so, yeah, I do feel totally honored that you guys want to share with me as well. I'll be thinking of you in October when Ella turns 18.
Oh, thank you, hon. And equally with you in a couple of weeks, isn't it? A couple of weeks' time, July.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That first is horrible. Have you got anything planned?
We're having a pink party.
Oh, bless.
We're going to have a party. We're going to have all of our friends around. A lot of my family don't live close, but I think my sister's going to fly up. My brother's going to try to come, and all of our friends are going to come. And I'm just going to put like a little sign up with a little QR code for the Little Life Big Loss. I just have said, please, no presents. Like maybe just donate to the podcast, and we're just going to have fairy bread and all the things we would have if she was here, and a cake, and celebrate her.
Exactly.
And then the rest of the month I'll just fucking sob because July is fucked.
God, I know. But it's like October. Get the 4th of October and we do kind of fun things. And I say fun things. We used to do balloon releases, but the balloon police now around here are like, oh, you can't do a balloon release unless they're eco-friendly. So we kind of just do it now again and do lanterns. But yeah, and then on the 9th it's just shitty. And my kids also know, just mummy, just don't go near mummy today. We'll light a candle, and mummy's just going to cry. Mummy's going to cry. But that's what we're entitled to do.
Yeah. But I love that 17, 18 years on that you're still able to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not forgotten. You don't have to ignore it. Why should we have to?
Oh, no. And I'm really also grateful for the fact that, bizarrely, I wasn't on Facebook and Instagram wasn't around. I don't have those memories on Facebook, because I probably would have been one of those people who'd been documenting the whole pregnancy and then. But what I do love is that I joined Facebook in 2007, and so I've always put on Facebook her birthday, and we put the photos and the memories up. And every year I have such a lovely outpouring of people who just know, and those messages just still bring me so much comfort, just for people just to say, just thinking of you, and oh, bless.
I love that. So the 4th and the 9th of October, is it?
4th and the 9th of October.
Mm. Well, I hope you have a beautiful sleep tonight. I
Thank
have no
you
doubt that
so
Ella and Millie are
much.
having a
Thank
little
you.
cuddle in heaven right
They
now.
are. Sure they are.
Mm.
No.
Mm. Bless you, Katie. You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, thank you, lovely. Bye-bye. Bye.